Please stop using spreadsheets for your product roadmaps. In the next few minutes, I will show you how to build a product roadmap in Notion that keeps your team aligned and impresses your fans and users. All without any complex logic or formulas. You probably know the pain. You have all these strategic goals from leadership, and then you have a ton of user requests. And now you have to somehow put these two things together to create a roadmap that actually makes sense. And Notion is great at this. But here's the thing. Notion is only a tool. You also need a good system. So today I want to talk about three things. First, the time framework, an easy method for better roadmaps. Second, how you can use this framework to build a proper product roadmap in Notion. And third, how you can securely share this product roadmap with your users without accidentally leaking some confidential information. First up, why do most roadmaps suck? Well, because they are just glorified to-do lists with due dates. But a great product roadmap is not about listing features. It's about making strategic decisions visible. Think of it like an hourglass. From the top, you have your strategy flowing in, and from the bottom, you have the customer requests pressing up. And in the middle, that's where you need to make the strategic decision what gets prioritized and what doesn't. Like an hourglass. By using the time method in Notion, you can make all these things visible and actually make a proper informed decision. T stands for top-down vision, right? So your OKRs and strategy. I is input from users. All the feedback, feature requests, and little interactions that are going on. N is your meeting point, right? Where the strategy meets with reality. And E stands for evidence-based output. Because with this system, every part of the roadmap has a direct trail back to why this decision was made. Most product roadmaps are just pretty wish lists. But with this system, you can make actually informed decisions that matter. So much for the theory, so now let's start building in Notion. So, here we are on an empty Notion page where we're going to set up our databases. As I mentioned, we're going to use three databases here. One for our strategic initiatives, then one for the customer feedback, and then the third database that actually contains the product roadmap. In order to do so, you want to just click into the Notion page and then type /database. And this allows you to add a database to the page. Now, for the purpose of this setup, we're going to use inline databases, which is not how you want to have it architected in the end, right? We will move these databases to a separate backend page to make sure that it's clean and out of the way. But for building and developing, this is my recommended approach. So let's click on here and then let's say empty database. If you wanted to, you could have AI build it for you. But in this case, right, we're builders. We want to try to figure these things out ourselves. So I'm going to click on new empty database and then let's name this strategy. Now, if you have a specific philosophy, right, if you follow OKRs, if you have specific KPIs or any other element, right, for your high-level planning, then feel free to name it that way and adopt it. It doesn't really matter what it's called, right? It's just important that you have a place to store these directives. And of course, if your company already has this kind of leadership database in Notion that informs the company about, okay, these are our priorities, then you can simply connect the other two databases to it rather than setting it up from scratch. So let's do this again, /database, new empty database. And this one will be called, customer feedback. And then last but not least, actually, let's move this in between, right? So that represents our hourglass structure. In between here, we're going to repeat it one more time, new empty database. And this database will be our actual product roadmap. With your basic databases set up, it's time to think about the kind of information that you need to store on every single database. And again, this will depend very much on what matters to your business. So I'm just going to give you some recommendation, right? A good starting point, and then you can customize it to your own needs. One tip here, I would not go too overboard and too complex. It's always easier to add complexity later, right, than to reduce it. So try to restrict yourself to the minimum amount of information that you want to store on them and then later expand it. So for strategy, we kind of need, of course, the name of it. Then we want a property to indicate the potential impact of this, right? What do we assume what will happen with it? We want to mark our priority. So this would be a select property. So I'm going to look for select and call this priority. And then I want a third property to indicate the status of this initiative, right? Are we currently working on it or not? Very simple, very clean. You could again, right, add now the duration of this, right? What quarter do you want to work in? Who's the owner of that strategy? All very valid properties, but for the purpose of this simple demo, this is what we're going to keep it at. Before we move on though, there's one thing that I would encourage you to do, and that is to take just a few seconds to customize the icons of these properties. Because in particular, when you build Notion for teams and for a company, it's very, very important that you have a clear visual design language. And that starts by making sure that you assign an easy icon so that when you scan a large database or several databases, you immediately know what you're talking about. So for impact, let's use the weight as an indication. For priority, let's maybe use it from charts. We have these levels, which are kind of nice. And while we're at it, we can also quickly edit this property and give it our options, right? So we can say high, medium, and, crucial. Since it is a strategy, right? I assume there's no low priority strategy. So let's have crucial at the top, high, and then medium. And then we can sort of, like crucial, that would be probably purple. High will be red, and then medium will be this yellow color. Great. And then status, we can leave as is, right? One status property, that's fine to have this icon there. But for the other ones, we want to customize it. Next, for customer feedback, what we want to record is, we probably want a quick, just main information piece. Then we might want a text field for an explanation, and a select property for the market segment, right? To just indicate, okay, is this sort of depending on who our clientele is, right? So for Notion, it might be the difference between enterprise users, a small or medium business, or a personal user, right? These might be, if we were to build this for Notion, how they might differentiate between their different categories. Market segment, and then last but not least, we want a source, right? And we can approach this in different ways for this purpose, right? Let's assume that we have a separate ticketing system. Maybe we can take a look in a moment of how we can also add these things directly from here. But for now, let's say, okay, we want first a select property to indicate the source. And here, it will be sort of sales, customer success, and I don't know, maybe general interviews, whatever sources we have to get customer input. Plus then as last one, right, you might want to add a URL property for sort of original to go back to where that was initially posted. And then we go through the same things, right? I will add an info icon here to make it visually clearer. For the market segment, we're going to use shapes to make that easy to understand. Source, probably something like, might be the chat bubble, right, where did it originally pop up. And for the original, we can again leave the linked icon like that here. On to the heart of the build, the product roadmap, but we want to keep to the same principles here, only the most important properties, add complexity later. What we definitely need to add first is a select property to indicate our timeline for this. And what I actually would recommend in the beginning is to not have specific dates, right? Or even a quarter of when you plan on launching this. Because reality is complex, right? And you might not exactly know when you get around to a feature. So rather than, making promises that you can't stick to, I would recommend to have some very clear what's next. So the options that I recommend you start with is now, right? For things that you're currently working on. Then next, things that you plan to implement after these round of features have been completed. And then later to indicate that, yes, you are aware that this is a feature request and you know that it's supposed to come, but currently you're not really planning on working on it anytime soon. Great, very clear starting point, and probably enough to communicate, okay, this is what we're going to work on. You then also want, of course, a status property, right, to indicate, even if it's in the now column, right, are you actually working on this? Or is this something that still has to be started? Here you definitely need an owner, right? So we will add a person property and we'll call this an owner or responsible person. Another rule, right, for building efficient Notion systems is that pretty much anything should have an owner. Customer feedback might be an exception, right? Customer feedback might be something that you just record. But the second it is any kind of actionable item, right? A task, a project, even like a document that needs to be kept up to date, you always want to have an owner property on your database. And after that, it's fairly simple. We have these as the quintessential information. So you probably want to add two properties, right? You want to add an internal description or internal briefing, right? Let's call it that. And then we want to have like the description for the, like external description, like we can just mark that for later to communicate to outsiders what we actually worked on here. And same game as well, right? Let's add some elements here. Let's add our time icon. That's for the person owner. That person thing we can keep. Although actually, let's change this to a single person, right? Because we have the owner is one person. Our internal briefing might be a letter or a page, and our external description that we will go with the info again, right? Again, just keeping this visual clarity so that we know at a glance whenever we see this eye indication, that's just where we can learn a little bit more about it. Now, before we move further with these databases, let's talk about why these three are so important. A roadmap that is one-dimensional will fail. If it's all just strategy without ever listening to customers, right? Or if it's just a list of the things that were requested, that won't really bring your company forward. But by separating your two inputs into two different databases, and then having a third one, right, that accumulates everything together, you can make it all visible. That way, your roadmap stops being about opinions and feelings and is about actual real data. Oh, and of course, if you don't want to build this yourself, I have also a template for you. You can download it with the link in the description for free. Connections between databases are really the first sign that you're leveling up your Notion skills, right? I always say the level 1 is when you just use Notion as a note-taking tool. Level 2 is when you start discovering databases. And level 3 is when you realize that you can, combine databases together to build whole systems. The property type that we need in order for this and to make this happen is a relation. And if you've never worked with a relation, don't worry, it's fairly straightforward. What you can do is you can tell Notion that an entry in this strategy database will be connected, right? Will have a relation to another entry. And before we actually do this, let's just add a strategy, right? Let's say, okay, we need to increase, time on app by 145%. Okay, let's go big. And then on our product roadmap, right, a specific item that might add to this would be the reworked, home screen, which just makes it much more easy and pleasant to work with this app. And then one customer feedback might be that it is, sort of unclear and small icons. Perfect. Now, right, like this reworked home screen addresses this customer feedback, and it is intended by us to help us with this strategy item. So time for the relations. Let's click on plus, search for relation. And then here we will relate this to product roadmap. Now, very, very important, pretty much all the time when you create relations in Notion, you will want to turn on two-way relation. That way, it shows up on both sides, and it's overall much the go-to feature. Very, very rarely do you want to show a relation only on one end, because that would mean that you see on strategy what product item, is related to it, but you wouldn't see on the product item what strategy belongs to. Usually doesn't make sense. So let's add the relation, and we can, just call this here sort of the feature, and here strategy. That is fine. Add relation. And now you see we have here our feature element, and here on product roadmap, if we scroll to the side, we will see strategy. Another thing you'll notice, we have both times these default icons, which we of course rework immediately. It's even more important with relations than with other properties, because if you imagine that you have a bunch of relations, they all have the same arrow, kind of hard to tell. So we want to figure out, okay, what is our main icon per element and link that in. And for the feature, let's actually use this nice little circle with a dot inside. And for the strategy, we can use a target symbol. And then we're going to repeat the same thing with customer feedback. So we can do this from customer feedback, or we can do it from the product roadmap. Doesn't really matter. Let's create a relation, this time to customer feedback. Two-way relation, yes please. Customer feedback, we will call this again feature, right? Just be in line. And then for customer feedback, this might be, just a single bubble to indicate it as feedback. And here on customer feedback, we're going to use again the circle, right? So that if you're here, immediately same idea as there. Let's talk about features. Once you set up these relations, you can now start connecting these entries, right? So if I'm gonna increase time on app by 145%, right? If I click into this feature, I see now a list of the features in my product roadmap. I can say, well, yes, this is associated here. And once I do this and I go to the product roadmap and scroll to the side, you see that my strategy is mentioned here now. Same way, the other way around, right? Upon customer feedback, I say, well, unclear and small icons. it also now starts popping up here that this feature will be developed to address this issue. Now, here's where it gets exciting. What you're building is not siloed information. It's all connected. Whenever you look at your roadmap together with your team, you have all the information that you need to make a decision at your fingertips. Now, at this point, I could show you a super cool formula with a weighting logic, right? That based on how much of a priority an OKR is and how much customer feedback you have, it will automatically sort of like balance out the roadmap. You could build this, and if you want to, there's a link for like a formula masterclass in Notion below, but I would actually recommend to not do that in the beginning. I think this is one of these situations where you don't want to automate. The friction is a feature, not a bug. Sitting down together with your team, looking at the strategy, right, and the input from customers, and then making an informed decision yourself is probably one of the most important parts of your job if you are in charge of the roadmap. The system's job is it to surface all the information that you need to make that call. Let me show you this in action. I have added a bit of sample data to our database here, right? We have several strategies now. We have in our product roadmap a bunch of features that we want to develop, and then we have a lot of customer feedback, just so you see how it all ties together. Let's open an entry in our product roadmap. So for now, it's just this fairly unorganized look, right? We have our related customer feedback, external description, internal briefing, our strategy. That's nice, but it's not the most, it's not the easiest to understand. So the next thing on our list, right, to make it easier to analyze is that we should customize this layout. If I click on here, we now have the option to change the way information is displayed on a single entry. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to move these properties to the side panel, right, out of our way. So we have more real estate here to work with. Second, let's click back on the title of our product roadmap entry and think about what are the most important properties that we need to pin, right, that we always need to highlight when we look at this. And then we can come to the side here and select those. So probably what I care about, right, is what is the current timeline option, right? Is something that we're working on currently or later? What is the status, and who is the owner, right? These are probably the most important parts. Then the strategy part, right, that's also highly relevant, but it's even more relevant. So I'm going to pin it below. So I'm going to click on plus, right? And I will click on the strategy element, and I want to highlight this here below. The next two things that we then have, right, is external description and internal briefing. Those are two more things that I want to highlight here. So I'm going to click on plus again. This time internal briefing, right? And then one last time plus, and then external description. So now if we just apply this for a second, what we have now, right, is already much better in terms of information flow. We see, okay, it is the enterprise developer platform. We are working on this later. It's currently not started, and Sergey is the owner. We also see what strategy it belongs to, and then we can have a look at the internal briefing and the external description. Pretty good. Now, what piece of information is missing? Well, the customer feedback. So let's go back, customize layout again. And now this time we need to click out of this, right? So nothing is highlighted. And then I have the option to switch this to a tabbed layout. And this is where the magic is going to start. So the second I do this, we see that we have here now the option that we have a tab called content. And I can click in this and I can actually rename this to key information. And then again, right, change our icon, maybe for let's actually use the dot circle on here as well. And then I can add another one for the customer feedback. So let's click on plus. And here I want to pull in customer feedback. We see our two databases that are related. Those are our options. And all of a sudden, I see the table, right, that shows me the customer feedback. And now I can design this in whatever way I want to show all that information. So let's go in, and first up, I want to right-click the name property, and I want to wrap this text, right? Because I want to always be able to read it all the way. Same for explanation. I need to have that information and see what they actually talk about, and then we can give this actually a little bit more breathing room. Feature is a property that we actually don't need to see, right? Because if I look at the enterprise developer platform, that is, well, the feature that this belongs to. So I can actually decide to hide it. So I can right-click it and hide it in view. Or here on the side, right, where it says view options, you can also do it through here. Makes it a little bit easier. Market segment, that's something I care about, right? Who has provided this feedback? Plus in the original link, right, and the source, so I can easily figure out where does this actually come from. Now, if I care about my market segments and I want to, structure it a little bit better, I can even take this one step further and say, okay, please group this information by market segment. And now, right, I have my enterprise client feature up here and my SMB feature down here. Let's apply again for all pages. And now you can see I can tap between my key information where I see, okay, this is the strategy that it belongs to, and this is my internal briefing and the external description. And why did we start to develop this? Well, here's the feedback, right? Because enterprise clients said missing webhook support for real-time updates and API rate limits are quite annoying. And from here, right, I can then dive always into the original data to figure out, okay, in what context did this come up, right? What was the issue that they actually tried to solve here? Now, if you're watching this thinking, I need this for my whole company, not just for roadmaps, well, that's literally what I do. I am building Europe's #1 Notion consultancy, and I help teams to transform their operations using Notion and other modern tools. If you want to chat about your specific situation, well, there's a link for that below. But for now, let's go back to building our roadmap. And the next step here is to make this roadmap public. Because if it's only internal, it loses kind of half the value. Your customers and external stakeholders need to see where you're going, but they don't need to see everything. At the moment, Notion alone is best used for internal practices. But it doesn't mean that we can't take our information in Notion and display it to the public in a secure way. In order to make this public, we need the help of a second tool, which is called Softr. And Softr is basically a front-end builder for your Notion, right? Your data and your internal team keeps working in Notion with this setup, but then you can pull the relevant information out of it and build a simple web app that you then can deploy either as a subdomain on your main website, right? And sort of have roadmap.company name, or you can have it completely standalone. Now, once you're logged into Softr, right, link for that down below in the description, you can click here on create a new app, and this will allow you to set something up. You can start with a template. There is actually a roadmap template that you can map to, or you can start from scratch. Now in this case, let's speed up our development by starting with a template. So I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to look for the roadmap option. And here we see public roadmap. So let's take a look at this, right? This is pretty neat. We have sort of our main options for the different features. We even have the option to submit new suggestions. So we're going to use this template. And then we're going to import it. Now here we can map a data source, right? In this case, I'm going to map my Notion, right? If this is the first time that you use Softr, you will be prompted to add a new one. In this case, I can map my existing one, and then I will click on continue to pull all the data in. And then in a moment, we're going to see our Softr app being built here together. With the template here, it's time to actually map our data. So you see this slightly changed because I already selected my database here on the side. Basically, after we have our source connected, we want to pick the correct database from down here. And since I had several product roadmaps and I didn't know which one it was, right, I just added a V in front of it to easier identify it. If your database doesn't show up here, what you want to do is go back to Notion, click on the 3 dots in the top right corner, then scroll down to connections. And here you need to make sure that Softr is listed. If that's not the case, search for Softr here, right, and then you can give it access to these pages. All right, with that being done, we can now start mapping our information over. So I'm going to the content tab, and here I can now choose, okay, what information from here, right, should be reflected here in this database. We currently see that image is hidden. That is fine, right? I don't want an image in here. For the H3, it maps to the name property, which is the main property in my database. So that is correct, but it currently doesn't show here the right way. So I'm just going to refresh Softr once, and then it should pull in the live data, right? So we actually see how it looks like. Perfect. So now we see enterprise developer platform. That's great. We pull in the name as well, and we pull currently in the status. So I don't want to actually pull in who's internally responsible, right? That's not some information I want to expose. So rather than the owner, I'm going to switch this. I'm going to switch this to the external description, right? That's a lot more relevant as the information piece. And then we could now add the status here as the tag, but we could also say, actually, this might be a different part of information we want to have in here. Maybe we just want to remind them of actually the timeline level that we have here. I think, again, right, it's more relevant that they know, are we planning to work on this later or are we planning to work on this now? Let's skip the upload button for now. We go back to that in a second. First, search bar, right? People will have an option to search for a specific update. So here, rather than being able to search by name and owner, right, I'm going to remove those two. And for instead of the name, I want to have, again, the external description as an option for them to filter it by, to search it. Filter is relevant though as well. So let's here give them now the option to say, okay, I want to show everything that is currently on the timeline, right, or everything that is later on there. So clicking on add filter. And here for our category, right, what we will be filtering by is the timeline option. And you see, as soon as we have this in here, it pulls in from Notion our options, right? Later, next, and now. I do want to reverse that sort order though. So I'm going to say, well, sort is actually Z to A or as defined in source, right? That way we can have it then the way we have it listed in Notion. Right? In this case, let's make sure that we have now at the very front, then next, and then only later. And I want to actually have the same thing be true for my data here. So in order to make sure that that's the case, let's go back to source. And then here for our list setting, right, we can say, okay, please sort this by the timeline Z to A, right? Everything that is now should be here first. That's what we want to prioritize showcasing, unless the user says, okay, only show me the things that are next on there. This is already pretty useful because we have now a setup, right, where we can share a part of our database with external users. They will not get access to other properties, right? They will not see what else we've set up here. For example, who is the owner and what is our internal briefing, or even worse, what customer feedback is this based on, right? Only the specific properties that we decide to map here and to show here will be exposed to users on the front end. And we can take this now even one step further. Let's say, for example, that in our roadmap, we also want to explain a little bit more to the external stakeholders and users what exactly we're planning, right? So that we can get early feedback in case it's not aligned with what they have in mind. So here, what I've done is on this page, as a sample, on my key information page, right, I've added a description. And you can do that anywhere, right? Because remember, in Notion, these are just pages, right? They are still behaved like Google Docs, so you can add any kind of content to them. In this case, right, this is my sample briefing for this feature. Let's display this also in Softr. So here we should be able to do the same thing, right? A user should be able to click into an individual card and then get that additional information. How do we do that? Well, we're going to start by going on the actions option. And here you see that under actions, we have this option of item on click. What should happen when we click on something? And currently it says do nothing. Let's change this to instead open the details page. And you can think of this as the exact same behavior that happens in Notion, right? In Notion, you have your database entries and you can click open to see the details. That's what we also want to achieve here. So open details page. Then we get the option to select a page. And here we see we currently don't have a details page in this roadmap. So our template didn't set one up for us, but that's no problem, right? We can simply create this. Let's create here, create detail page for product roadmap. Wait a second. And then we see here on the side, our under pages, we have now this new option for product roadmap details. So here, right, you'll always be able to see all your pages. We can go back to home, right? That's the page that we've set up so far. And I can navigate to product roadmap. And I'm just going to drag this below, right? Just for my organization, because I want home at the top and then the details below. And here you can see it already pulled in a lot of content. And I want to edit this, right? This is not what I want to see here actually. So in order to do this, we're going to click in here. This gives us, first it tells us where it pulled it from. That's all correct. And now under content, I can change what's shown here. So in the list item fields, the top section, cover media, no, I don't want to have any media, right? That should go. Name is fine. External description, that's also fine. And then we can actually have the status here, although let's keep this in sync with what we had previously and instead map here our timeline, right? Status, whether we actually work on it, might be again something we want to keep confidential. So far, so good. Now, this section I don't really care about, right? I actually don't want any of these options here. I really just want to highlight and then I want to pull in the page content. So I'm going for now to delete this. But if you have more meta information from your roadmap that you plan on developing, well, you could pull this in here. But for now, let's just click on delete and then it's gone. So next I'm going to click on add section. And here, what I want to add as a layout, right? We can pick stacked or columns, but we will actually add only one property. And that one property will be the page content. So this is what I'm going to turn on. And now we're going to pull in all the information from that page into here. Now in preview, it sometimes doesn't fully work. So we need to quickly publish our app and see how it would actually look on the web. In order to do so, let's click on the top right corner on publish. That's for now all we need. We can pick a custom domain later. We just want this in preview mode. Now it is published. Now I can copy this link, go to an anonymous browser, paste it in, and I see my public roadmap is here. Perfect. Now, which database item did we add it to? I think it was this one, Smart Onboarding Flow, right? This is the one that actually has the content in here. So let's see on our roadmap, right? Refresh it once, then there it was, right on command. There's our Smart Onboarding workflow. And we see also we have now this little hover animation that we can adjust later if we want to. Going to click in here. That should now open the details page, right? If it works, yep, there we go. And now we see, perfect. Here is our Smart Onboarding workflow, right? All the details from our Notion page pulled in here. We still have page content here on the side, right? We want to remove this in a second, but all the details that we need to have here now are available on that page. And we create this user experience, right, that they can click and learn more about it. There's of course still some things left to desire about the user experience, right? There's currently no back button or anything to go back to the rest of the roadmap. So let's work on that next. Back in Softr, let's make sure we have this selected, right? And where it says page content, this is where we can now click in and we can either just remove it altogether. This might be actually the best option, right? So we have no label at all, or you could say something like learn more. That's the starting point. Next, time to rework this button, right? To give the user a way to go back to the main page. And we find this one under actions. We can just delete the existing button and then add our own one. And here, the option we want to pick is scroll to. This allows us to create internal navigation. So we will call this go home. And the option scroll to, well, please scroll to the list section, right? This is the roadmap on our homepage in the same tab. Then we can click on publish updates, and then let's check again how this looks like, right? Let's refresh our app here for a second. Let's go back there to our first entry that we had, and then we can pull in the data from there. Here's our onboarding workflow. And now we see we don't have the label anymore, right? It is now aligned properly on this page. If we wanted, we could inject some CSS, right, to style this differently. And then we have our go home button to go back. We can actually do some slight changes to the way it looks, right? By just being here in the style section, we see, okay, for our general options, right, we could make sure that our labels have a certain different layout, right? We can say, okay, actually here we want a different color. We don't want black, right? And maybe we want actually really bold, right? Let's go for extra bold, and let's go for something like this, deep red. And then we can publish this for some small changes, right? You see now this is applied here. And if we want to go deeper in, we could actually also change this through CSS settings. This would go a bit beyond this video though. So if you are curious on how in Softr you can do things like, using CSS to style pages, or how you can, on the main page, make this upvote button work, right? Like by having users and having them click this, I'll link another video in the description where I explain that logic. For now, for this simple roadmap, right, where we just want to say, here, this is what we plan on working on. And if someone wants to do something, right, they can suggest a new feature. That's what we'll set up in a second. But the upvote button, this is something we're going to hide. So we go to content and just going to hide this one for now. And then right in the description, you find another video that will explain you how to set that up. So the last two things, first, configuring our suggest a new feature option, and then making sure everything is ready to publish. And then we can do some last changes in our Notion for our internal team so that they also have a nice way of working with this. In this case, right, this is going to mean that we need to go to pages and we need to add another page. We need to add a form page so that someone can submit this. So I'm going to click on plus and we're going to call this, just form. That is fine, but you could also, call it new feature, whatever it is that you want. Let's click on save. And then on here, what I'm going to search for is the form option. Right, and here we see, okay, this is our form part. We can have it with the side text. We have a few different options in this case. Right, all we need is this simple centered form title. And then same idea as with the other Softr blocks, right? We get to configure it. So where should we send the responses? Well, we want to send these responses to Notion, and we want to send these responses to our customer feedback database, right? This is again where you tie in now the public roadmap together with your other database in Notion, so that if someone suggests something, right, you as a team can decide, okay, maybe we have already a feature that this belongs to. So let's look for customer feedback. There it is. That's where I want to send it. And now under the question tab, right, we can decide how do we map these things, right? So for the form title, that actually we can quickly set in a second here, right? But let's go first to form title. When I say, okay, for the heading, no, sorry, it's here, suggest a new feature. We could have some text here, right? This helps us make the product better. And then we don't care about the name, right? We will not do this for the moment, but you could collect name and email. You would simply create these fields then in Notion. For now, right, I'm going to ignore this. All we're going to do, right, is we want a text field for them to say something, and then we will pull this into Notion. And so all the other things, we're going to remove all of them. And the only thing that I care about is a field for an input with and that we will map to the name of it, right? That I want. And then I want another field with the input, and this would be the explanation, right? And these are the two things that we care about. Let's click on publish, right? And on action, we don't want to refresh. We want to go back to our homepage. That's perfect. So let's click on publish, and then connect it. For that, let's go to pages, to our homepage, which we're going to put at the top again. And on the homepage, we should now say that when someone clicks the button here on this database, it needs to open that form. So we go to actions, suggest a new feature, click on here, and now we see, okay, what happens? Currently it adds a record. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to open a page. I wanted to open our form page in the same tab. Click on publish again, and then, oops, it changed the label. So, let's go back to suggest a new feature, publish one last time, and now we can go back right to the front end, see that it all works as intended. Let's refresh this. Our buttons should also be gone for the upvotes. We can click on suggest a new feature, and there we have our form. So, final cleanup. You of course want to make sure, right, that you swap out the names of the template for your own roadmap. If you want to use the email form, you can use the options here, right, under email capture to add an action to connect this, to your email tool, right, MailChimp, MailerLite, direct integrations. You can use Zapier or Make to integrate with it, or with the webhook to make sure you capture those subscribers. Or you could change it to a normal hero, right, without an email capture if you don't care about it. And then we can go into our settings and make sure we are ready for everything. So under general, we can change our subdomain, right? So in case we don't want this connected to the Softr app, we can either say, okay, this is, our roadmap name at Softr, or we can connect our own custom domain in the settings in a moment. Same for our, favicon and all the other information. Then below general, what's also quite relevant, right? Custom domain, that's where we would connect that. And that's pretty much it, right? If we want to make sure it's findable on Google, we can do that on SEO. But apart from this, this is all that we need for a simple public roadmap, right? Without user management. All we want to do is show parts of our Notion workspace publicly here, which we can do, right? All of this on the free Softr plan without having to pay for another tool. Back in Notion, let's make sure we also add a nicer UI here. Because right now, right, we just have all these databases on top of each other. That's not so good for our team. So what do? First, but things first, we're going to turn all of these into their own pages. I'm going to click on the 6 dots, and I'm going to say, okay, turn it to page. Same here for the table here, turn it to page. And same for my customer feedback, turn, where is it? Grab the wrong one, turn into page. Then I'm going to make sure that they all have the correct icons, right? So this one is our target. For the product roadmap, we had our circles. And for customer feedback, we had our chat. And then I'm going to move them in my backend. Usually, right, you would have a backend page in Notion where you store all the information. If you don't know how to set it up, check out the link in the description. I have a big Notion for Business guide. In this case, I'm just going to create a toggle. I'm going to cheat a little bit, call this backend. But usually, right, you would move this into a different page. And then we have all these databases in there, tucked away safely, and we can actually work on the product roadmap UI for our team. For our team, the thing that should probably be front and center on here, right, is the actual roadmap. What are we currently working on? So let's say /create link view of database. Let's add our product roadmap. And now let's create a new view. We don't want to see it as a table. Instead, we want to see this as a board. And this gives me now this layout like a Kanban, but I don't want to actually show this as a Kanban by status. I want to show it as a status by timeline. So I'm going to go down here to group by. I'm going to switch this from group by status to group by timeline, because this is what we care about, right? We want to say, okay, now, next, and later. This is the process in which we're going to work on. And then personally, I always like to color columns, because I think it just looks a lot nicer. Small adjustments just to the look and feel of it. I always like to hide the name of the database, makes for a cleaner look. I also like, if we only have one view here, to remove actually the name in this. So I'm going to click rename, and I'm going to just put a space in here, right? And then we just have the icon. And actually, let's swap also out the icon for our roadmap one. And then let's make sure that we show all the properties here that we care about. So in this case, right, that would be under properties. Here I want to see the owner, because that would be very relevant for me. And I want to see the strategy, right? The reason why we're actually working on this. And now, right, for our team, we have sort of the core information. They can click into every element, right? They see why we work on this, if they want to dive deeper into that element. They have the customer feedback that relates to this. And in case, right, we've created this public facing element, they also have that all within one click. Next, let's help them make sense of the feedback that shapes these decisions. So let's scroll down and say H2, and I want to call this customer feedback. Same drill here. We're going to type /create link view of database, and we're going to pull in the customer feedback. Now here, I want to start with a table view because I want to show a lot of information, but I want to update this a little bit. First, we're going to hide the table again, right? Here, I need a view name. I want to call this most recent. And then I want to add an icon for this that indicates this, right? So probably the time icon, and click on that. Now, in order to show the most recent features, we actually need to add it as a property. Currently, we don't have anything in terms of time, right? So let's add plus and then our created time. And this gives us an information of when this record was created. And we see, even though we didn't have it previously, right? It is filled out for all entries. I'm going to click here, right click, hide in view, because we don't want to see it. We just want to sort by it. So let's click on sort, created time, and then descending, which means the newest pieces of information will be at the top. Next up, property cleanup. Again, 3 dots, properties, and let's hide for now let's hide feature. Actually, what else do we not need? The original, yeah, this is fine for now. This is what we don't even let the source we can leave here, and we have a bit more screen real estate to work with. So I'm going to make these a bit longer, and I'm going to again make sure that all of these are wrapped, and we can actually read through them. Last but not least, I want to make sure that not too much here loads at once. So I'm going to be on the 3 dots and set a load limit of 10 entries, which means we have now here always the last 10 entries, right, of customer feedback that can go in here. Then we want to make sure that we catch all the customer feedback that doesn't have a feature yet. In order to do so, let's just right click on most recent. Let's duplicate this and let's call this missing roadmap item. Right? So these are the feedback items that we have, but they haven't really been matched to anything yet. And let's change this from this symbol to the alert one. And here, what we now want to do is we want to set a filter. So let's click on filter, add advanced filter, and say, okay, show me everything where feature is empty. Now in this case, since it's our demo database, right, nothing is in here, but as your new feedback trickles in, right, it will pop up in this one and it tells you, okay, I need to, assign this to a feature. I need to figure out, do we have a roadmap feature or not? Now you can do this, of course, manually, right? You can go in here and check where it is, or you could actually also use AI for that. For example, you could use the Notion MCP, right, the Model Context Protocol, to connect your Notion to Claude. And then you can simply ask Claude, hey, how does it work? How can I pull in this information and help you then find maybe the matching roadmap item if you don't know exactly where that belongs. I'll have a link for that also down below in the description. Last but not least, let's add a bit of action and insights here. At the very top, let's press enter and let's add 2 columns. So I'm going to type /call. And here on the left side, I want to add a button. And with this button, I want to say, okay, add new roadmap item. For the icon, we're going to pick our roadmap icon, but in this case in black, because I want to keep it monocolored. And when this button is clicked, what we want to do is we want to add a new entry to this. So I'm going to say, okay, add page 2, select database, product roadmap. And then now we can edit properties. We can say, okay, the owner should be the person who clicked, right? If there's any other property that we want to preset, we can do that too, right? We could also say, well, if something gets added, by default, it will be added to the later time stage. And in case there would be anything else, we could do that too, but I think this is good for now. And then the second action will be that once we've added it, we want to open it. So I'm going to pick open page for my URL, and I'm going to select here the page edit in side peek. That's my preferred mode. Then we can click on done and we can see, okay, if now someone clicks this button, right, we add a new entry here, test entry, and we see it pops up here on the side, and we can then, move it around, prioritize it. We can also go to customer feedback and we can link that. So we can either have, if we have new customer feedback, we can add that, or we can add existing feedback to it by it. There's actually currently a bug going on with Notion. By the time you watch this, it's hopefully resolved. But if we have grouping turned on and there's no groups visible, right, and it all is empty. So let's go back in here, right, and for a moment turn off the grouping just so you see how it's supposed to look. Let's say group, hide empty groups. If we turn this off, then it should work as well. And now we see, okay, test entry, perfect, customer feedback. Yeah, we can now see, okay, we know maybe we have some existing feedback from the enterprise group, right? We could link this in here and then it pops up there. Or we have a new feedback, right? We can click on new page and link it that way. Second part, insights, right? It might also be relevant at this point to see, okay, how much customer feedback do we actually collect regularly? So let's type / here chart, and let's grab this vertical bar chart. And here what I want to do is I want to get from customer feedback. On the x-axis, I want to show the created time, right? And I want to have sort of, I don't have much sample data here, right? So usually you would probably pick week over week or month over month. I'm going to pick day just so we have a few different bars. And then we can show the count and we see, okay, we had 4 pieces of feedback on June 3rd, 22 on June 1, right? When I built all of this. And then we could even say, okay, please group this by market segment, right? Because it might be a lot more relevant for me to know, okay, how much enterprise feedback do we get than, how much personal user feedback do we get? Can make this then small in terms of the style options, just so it takes up less space. And then, we could add a few more buttons up here. And then we have pretty much our product roadmap dashboard done. Now, before you rush off and build this, there's one more thing that I would like to encourage you to do. And that is to include a not right now section. Even ideas that you decide against should be in the roadmap. It should be clear why you're currently not building this. This manages expectations. And if you later then change your opinions, right, you still have all the information there and can simply plug it back into your roadmap. Making this adjustment or any other adjustment to the system is really easy. So let's say we want this other stage in here. All we need to do is click to the 3 dots, properties, and then to our timeline and say, well, let's add one option. Let's add the option not doing, right? Maybe in all caps. And let's not have it green. Let's have this in gray. And now we have this here, right? Perfect. We also currently it won't show up here because we have it hidden, right? But we could say, okay, in terms of our groups for not doing, I would like to show this, right? So we have we show specifically what we're not doing. Although I would recommend instead of having it fully here, I would like to just hide it and then pin it. And this now means, right, that you have it here on the side. And you could, for example, this test entry, right? This is actually something we're not doing, and I can now drag it in this easily without this list of not doing, cluttering up my view here. The second change that we need to make, of course, is to make sure that we hide this also on the front end. You might actually want to expose what you're currently not doing in Softr, but you might also say, actually, this is, confidential, like the things that we decide against, we don't want to make public. Or maybe there's in general a secret element, right? You might want to add a checkbox to this to check, say, secret, and then it should not show up in Softr. So good to know how this would be done. Let's go back to it. And we can do so by clicking on our main list. And then here on the front part on source, right, we can add a filter condition. And we can say, okay, add a condition. Only show this if a field, now, right, if you had a checkbox that says hide, you would filter based on this. In my case, right, I will do the timeline part. And I will say, okay, only show this if the timeline is one of these 3 values, right? The other one doesn't currently show because we would need to, is any off, that's our option. Is any off later, next, now. The hidden option doesn't yet show because we would need to refresh this once, but of course that logic would work just as well. That's the flexibility that Softr offers here, right? In combination with Notion, and so I really love it for these specific use cases. So thank you so much, Softr, for sponsoring this video. And there you have it, a powerful product roadmap using the time method. It's one of many puzzle pieces that can turn your Notion into a powerful engine for your company. And if this got you all excited to roll out Notion to your whole company, but you don't know where to start, well, don't worry, I've got you covered. Here's a full tutorial on how to set up Notion for your business, going from an empty page to a complete setup. Just click here, and I will see you in a few seconds.